about the differend, I never know how to start, and I think I start the discussion on it a different way every time. Because I'm always finding something, and I'm sort of excited about what I found, and like I have to talk about it first. So what I thought we would do is begin on page Roman numeral 12, please. At the very bottom, stakes. What's at stake? And Lyotard is constantly asking that question, which is a question, it's a good question that we should ask. Sometimes when we get into a discussion and it seems that, there's a relay back and forth, but there's always a possibility that we are speaking at cross purposes. We just have two different points at which we're standing on, and we can't even begin. We might discover or have the intuition that we are, we have not yet agreed to disagree, okay, that on a particular point. So,
What's the name of the paragraph?
I'm sorry?
Six. Six.
Oh, okay.
Can we go by paragraphs, because I think we have different pagination.
Really?
No,
it's
number 12.
Numerous 12, that's page 12, okay. Sorry, go on.
Say, so we was, speaking of cross purposes, which happens all the time. Okay. But so it's a good question to ask, what is it at stake that we share and that we hold in common so that we can find the same page and know where we will be going. So it's stakes, right? Down at the bottom left. To convince the reader, this is not to persuade, but to convince the reader, including the first one, the A, what's the A in this?
The author.
Yeah, and what else? What would be like the author?
Addresser?
Yes, that's very good. That thought, cognition, ethics, politics, history, or being, depending on the case, are in play when one phrase is linked onto another. To refute the prejudice anchored in the reader by centuries of humanism and of human sciences, that there is man, that there is language, that the farmer makes use of the latter for his own ends. Man speaks, man is spoken. Human beings speak, human beings are spoken. Which is it? Which is it though? But you can't be both, really. I thought I was speaking. I'm speaking right now, aren't I? Sure. That there is language. That the farmer makes use of the latter for his own ends. And that if he does not succeed in attaining these ends, it is for want of good control over language by means of a better language. It may be languages all the way down. To defend and illustrate philosophy in its differend with its two adversaries. On its outside, the genre of economic discourse, exchange, capital. On its inside, the genre of academic discourse, mastery. By showing that the linking of one phrase onto another is problematic, and that this problem is the problem of politics. To set up a philosophical politics apart from the politics of intellectuals and of politicians, to bear witness to the differend. Okay, now what I want to do for a definition, because there are all kinds of definitions and examples in here of what a differend is as an event. I want us to see from this film where the green ants dream. Werner Herzberg, Herzog, Z-O-G, yes. Herzog. Okay. So, and this is scene 8. and it is situated in the Supreme Court. Okay.
Silence, silence, all stand please, and remain standing. All persons having business before this honourable court are commanded to give their attendance, and they shall be heard. God save the Queen. Be seated, please.
I open the proceedings in the matter of Dayapu and others plaintiffs versus the two defendants, Ayers Mining Company and the Commonwealth of Australia, which is represented by the Solicitor General. I feel it's important to say at the outset that this case before this High Court is not merely one of Aborigines dispossessed of their ancestral land by the white man, finding in the activities of Ayers Mining Company a final assault on their beliefs. It's also a case that raises fundamental moral questions of great complexity. We must here discover whether the Aboriginal plaintiffs hold, in fact, in common law, a land rights title valid before 1788 to territories annexed by Governor Phillip, who, by hoisting the flag, claimed all of this vast continent for the British Crown.
At this point, Your Honour, it might assist the court if I could quote from Professor Ernst's discussion of the Jamakamala and Jamundamala. In this, he describes their claim to certain land, a claim which goes back to unthinkably ancient times, what they call their dream time. He also explains their clan relationship, which he identifies as a Mata-Mala combination. Professor Ernst even speaks of a Mata-Mala pair. The clan is essentially a patrilineal descent group, which is strictly exogamous. In other words, each member of the clan may marry only into the other half of the Mata-Mala combination. Now this brings us to the concept of the so-called moiety. And I must stress that this area of anthropological theory is still highly speculative, not to say controversial. There are certain aspects of it indeed that lie within the realms of as yet unexplained mysteries.
Objection, Your Honour.
The Solicitor General.
The witness is putting forward as expert evidence what are clearly presumptions and theories. He should be asked to confine himself to proven facts.
Objection overruled. The court is competent to reach its own conclusions. Thank you, Mr. Coulthard. The witness will continue.
We're going to tell you about the land, so our court can recognize the land that we live on. If the mining company coming and digging the earth or destroy the land, that meant they destroy the people.
Your religion, nango culture, nango tanya nango, ayina nango, ayon na pinango komelia, man kamaniyo, anina kamino.
That mining company come and destroy the land and the feeling of the people, and for that dreaming, win and dreaming.
Paano mariling ngai bandalango manamay watamo anango ngai nangarnina panal panulen bandalango nangar yurtuna kaya kanan na bandalango.
If you got a sacred land, a special area, dreaming land for green ants, if you're going to drew, that when you're going to destroy the people, the green one can to never come back again.
The counsel for the plaintiff, please explain what is meant by that. In answer to a specific question relating to the precise limits of his territory, your witness answered with this gesture. And can you translate that into English?
Please, Your Honour.
Order. I call the Solicitor General to order.
And on the question of the exact expanse of the tribal territory, I hear a little long way. Now what I'd like to know...
Mr. Coulthard, will you please restrain your boundless gift for irony?
With your indulgence, Your Honour, I'm very angry that evidence of this order should be admitted by the court, as well as repeated statements which are clearly hearsay by the Aboriginal witnesses.
I order that the transcript of these proceedings be so written as to include indications of descriptive gestures by the plaintiffs. And I assure Mr. Coulthard that this court will decide, in this case and in all others before it, what is and what is not admissible evidence.
Your Honour, I do not withdraw my objection.
Mr. Coulthard, I trust I don't need to remind you of the elaborate representations by the plaintiff's attorney in the case the Shawnee Indians versus the Dominion of Canada on the admissibility of evidence by the tribal witnesses as long ago as 1871. And as to your remark about hearsay, I'd like to remind you of the decision in the case Angu versus Atta before the Privy Council of the Gold Coast, West Africa in 1916. You are, of course, familiar with that decision.
No, Your Honour, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Oh, not? Then would you be so kind as to inform yourself of this case? In Angu versus Atta, the African indigenes reporting on tribal customs gave evidence essentially founded in hearsay and in such overwhelming frequency that these testimonies became so widely attested as to condense into a palpable truth, and the court had to take judicial notice of them and henceforth recognize hearsay as admissible evidence. And in my view, the proceedings before this court today form a close parallel with those proceedings I have referred to.
Progress. Here, you talk about progress over and over again. And where does it lead the Aborigine? It is progress into nothingness. What have the last 200 years brought? Extinction. And where that wasn't radical enough, cultural extermination by the white civilization. Simple outright murder was only part of it.
Order. This court is not a forum for political oratory.
Let me get back to the disputed numerical concept of the Aborigine. Their relationship to quantities is distinguished completely from ours. It is not subject to abstract enumeration. Therefore, in most tribal languages, there are only numbers from 1 through to 3. Everything beyond that is called many. However, if a black cattleman has a herd of 600 cows together enclosed in a corral, he will know at a glance, without even counting, that 2 cows are missing. we still have rudiments of disability. If, for example, a mother with 6 children is loading suitcases on a train in a crowded station, and one of the children escapes to the milk bar, that mother would know, with a single glance, without counting, that one is missing.
Mr. Barilla, you were not called to the stand. Mr. Milleripe, could you please make this clear to Mr. Barilla?
Your Honour, I'm a friar. I cannot speak his language.
The plaintiff, Mr. Barilla, was introduced to the court as mute at the start of these proceedings. I feel slightly confused. Is there anyone among the plaintiffs or witnesses who can translate?
The situation, Your Honour, is this man is the sacred custodian to the secrets of his tribe, and his tribe has died out. He is the sole and final survivor of his people, his clan. They call him a mute because there's nobody left on this earth for him to speak with.
Mr. Milleripe.
Your Honour, we come here to show you the most important sacred object, where we belong, and for the land. Please, I want you to remove the people. If they seen this sacred object, the world must destroy.
Motion accepted. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please leave the court? Mr. Milleripe, you are aware, however, that for reasons concerning the very nature of these proceedings, the defendant as well as the court reporter must be present.
This sacred object is very important. This sacred object has been buried in the ground for 200 years. And now we come and show you to prove what the land is belong, and belong to the land is. Most important to our life, to our feeling.
How should I record this, Your Honour? Wooden objects carved with markings. The markings indecipherable. The significance of the markings not plain to this court.
Silence, silence, all stand and remain standing. Be seated, please.
For all the reasons given, my decision must be for the defendants. The claims of the plaintiffs for radical legal title to the territories in question are rejected. This title lies, as before, with the Crown. The claims of the Aborigines do not accord with the provisions of English common law, which, though imported, is nonetheless, perhaps regrettably, the law of the land. I am most grateful for the dignity and elegance with which all parties have argued this difficult case. The action of the plaintiffs is dismissed. The cost of the proceedings will be paid by the Commonwealth.
Don't bloody ask for it. What's got into you, Hackett? Look, you're talking about a settlement out of corporate. What have they got to negotiate with? They've got nothing left.
Wonderful job, Eric. My profound congratulations.
Reader's drawing them out.
Now look, no court in the world can pass judgment on 200 years of history.
Look, what do you eat for breakfast, eh? Raisin bran? How do you sleep? You sleep well? With the air conditioning on? How are your thoroughbreds?
What's wrong with you? Whose side are you on?
Sorry, sir. You want me to have a talk with you?
I just noticed in the film this. Didn't pay attention to it before. At the end, at the very beginning, and at the end of the scene, basically. Silence, the door opens, the judge comes in, all stand, comes in, and then be seated. Look at these words. About which we cannot speak, we must remain silent. Okay. Proposition 7 in Wittgenstein's Tractatus stops there. As if somehow or another silence wasn't a phrase read in itself, okay, which is precisely what we have in the Differend is a continuation of Proposition 7. It's not the end at which we have to fall into silence. Okay. Silence is itself a phrase read. Okay. And what follows is all stand. Be seated. These are stasis words. Where we stand. And where we stand is this opening scene calling the court to order. Okay. To order, to art. Value, meaning. Order, value, meaning. And it's Commonwealth law, which is made very clear at the very beginning. Okay. There were laws here way before we came. This is what the judge is saying. But all decisions will be made in terms of Commonwealth law. So it's over. Okay. Because the sacred object cannot be understood, cannot be ciphered. Okay. Cannot be even, we don't know at the level of exposition what it is. So that's their law there. The law is oral, it's passed on. The man who is the keeper of the law, the traditions, the stories, is a mute in the sense suggest this film. Okay. Whether he does or not, his book is quite interesting. Bill Readings was a really interesting person too. He's the one who wrote All This Is Relevant, okay, to our point here. The University in Ruins. An incredible book, devastating. You read it, Joe?
I've looked at it, I haven't read it.
It's worth a good read. He was not able to finish that book. Okay, he was in a American Eagle plane, and it was going bad, and it crashed. So there's, I think, a statement to that event in the acknowledgments in the front of the book. And that film, there's a film of that plane crashing as it's coming into an airport, and it's shown to flight attendants, pilots, and so on. Because no one survived. My wife is a flight attendant. She's seen every year when they go to training. Okay, they watch those films. Okay, crash over and over again. But this is key. It is really key. I have not seen this before. It's not. I don't think it's been written about. But this is so key to what's happening. And remember, what the statement alludes to, and I want to show some other passages here, is the hang-up of humanism. That humanism, or in terms of the early Greeks, Pythagoras and others, a few others, put forth the so-called doctrine of human beings are, what's the exact phrase? Or the measure of all things. Measure usually means, the translation has, they give value to everything in the world, okay, in terms of the stories they tell, all of their actions. Okay? And it is human beings that give the value, and the world and everything else in it is just empty, okay, until we fill it with meaning. Okay? That's a disease, a dis-ease in the entire system. Okay? And what is not taken into consideration here are the other human beings, okay, or other beings. And the so-called lower animals who, they don't have a language and they don't communicate. They're just here to serve us. And everything else. The ground, okay, the land, the earth, and so on. And so it's, we could easily say, and I'm going to easily say it, it's incredible arrogance. Okay? And it should be a lesson to us all. So I went to, maybe we should stop just for a second and see what's on your mind after watching the film, because I'm really interested in knowing how you received it, and then we can pick up with this again.
It feels, you've told, you've mentioned this to me so many times, Differend, that sometimes I would speak in seminar, you would say, the Differend. Differend. And I see myself, so often, I've spoken and sometimes literally that fall on deaf ears, and sometimes just, obviously it's also figuratively. And so so I've learned how to be more silent, believe it or not, because I realize there's some things just, it doesn't matter. And saying it doesn't change people's minds, and that I've sort of tried to filter it into productivity of work. Because that's the stasis of the field publication. So.
People of color, people of different races, females, for the most part, silence. And the darkest irony, for a second I can think this, is all the damage that men do to themselves, okay? And to everybody, not only to everybody else, but since they're going to be selfish, whether they're wearing to themselves, okay? The damage that they do to themselves in these situations. Yes. So, remember A here, A, the addressing. Get rid of it, you know, basically. Put it under erasure. Addressing. We're all addressees. We come into being as for having been spoken to.
I don't know how significant this is, but I thought it was interesting in the film that the two different phrase regiments that are at stake both do have a notion of property. So there's not, it's, you know, a lot of times there's a romanticizing view or sort of an exoticizing view of indigenous cultures. Yeah, there's no property, it's all totally different from us. And there's not something that works as property under this particular way of viewing property. But there is still something that operates similarly. That you can stretch out your arm and say, this is the scope of the things, even if it doesn't draw a firm sort of, you know, surveyor's boundary around it and say this particular set of things. I don't know.
Could you please get the very beginning of this, you know, where we everybody comes on? Can you see this? Is that better?
Yeah. Move it a little bit, or?
Look at that. Look at that image. What is it? No, look at this. See those piles?
We're going to be blasting again soon. You've got to move. Boom, boom, quick, quick, understand?
Okay. That image at the beginning with the piles, what are the piles?
Termites or ants,
So it's clearly marked by the ants.
yeah.
The termites. You might want to read, if you haven't already, Chatwin's, Chatwin, I think it is. Song, lines. Do you know this?
Yeah.
Oh, better than all of us, I'm sure. Could you speak to it for me?
Bruce Chapman's book.
Yeah.
I read it years ago. I haven't done that. I haven't read the book for it, so it's very hard for me to kind of put it in context. But Bruce Chapman's book is about the Aboriginal dreaming going through the land and being sung through the land. And so they, But it was interesting with Bruce Chapman comes from an English perspective.
Yes.
So it's at the beginning it was well received, but then afterwards, outside of English specialists. So it was a bit. I think it's known a bit more now. And when I was watching that, I was thinking about the customary laws changed a lot since then.
Good.
Yeah. So now that, and they didn't mention terra nullius, which is the main reason for those cases to be dismissed.
Which is what?
There's nobody here. It's not as if they recognised the law existed before. There was nobody on that land. So it wasn't as if there was a conflict of laws. They just weren't there.
Okay.
One thing after watching that made me think is that it's also even a problem I have with philosophy, numerical philosophy, is that it tries to make a space where other people can't speak. And that seems to be sort of the groundwork of philosophizing, is to define the world in such a way that other people can't. They don't have a place to speak in it. You know what I mean? You're kind of pulling the ground out from other people and not letting them into it.
He makes much of that in terms of the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah.
And the attempt at revision of the history that Auschwitz never took place. Because what would constitute evidence, you've read that one, cannot be. Because they would have all died and been dismissed up the chimneys, okay, smoke. When I went to Auschwitz, my wife and I were teaching in Poland for a month, and just giving our time, and we had some time off, and so we went to Auschwitz, and as we were approaching, there was this guy in the field turning the soil. Oh my God. It's just, all of this is just ashes here. And they're eating the food from that. Didn't know what to make of it. Have you been to Auschwitz? 1 and 2?
I'm going next month.
Oh, okay. I remember going into the first Auschwitz, and I thought for sure I would feel all this evil, just saturating everything, and it had the feel of it looked like a place for summer camp for kids. You see the work will set you free, arch as you go under it, and of course you remember all the representations of that as well, historically, on newsreel, in films. And then you go to Auschwitz too, and there's virtually nothing there. There are a few buildings. And that's where I felt it. Because the Nazis tried to blow up as many of those buildings as they were retreating as possible. And that's I don't know if it's the place, but it's the general site that Sophie's Choice is made, okay, where they're getting off the train, and she has to choose the impossible choice. Well, the ants were there first. The termites were there first. The green ones. And of course, this is totally silly, Victor, but they were there first. It's their place. It sort of reminds me of, and it's hard for me to forget this passage also in Michel Serres, Rome, the Book of Foundations, okay? That he talks about Rome. Where did it come from? The termites. Hundreds of years of termites picking up a little bit, and talk about patience in carrying it and dropping it to make 7 hills. The city of God. Okay, goes to the city of God. And any later civilization could come, say in the 22nd century or whatever, and say, this is stupid stuff, man. So I don't know where then the foundations for making judgments about the land can come from. what is the phrase? The law of the land. Okay. And it has to begin somewhere, so it begins. Okay. And it begins at different times and places and in ways, okay, across cultures. So how do we communicate and lessen the terror that is perpetrated? That's what this book is about. Okay, as I said, every time I enter this book in a different way. The first time I did it, I just made sort of an outline, which you have here, okay, arranged on page 1, Roman numerals to the end. But there are things that I want you to see first, okay? Would you please turn to page 237? Is that right? 237? No, it's not page 237. What the hell am I talking about? Number 189. Is there a number 189? Yes. Yes. Oh, okay. That's what it is. Actually, I want you to turn to 188. The one before. You don't play around with language? You got that? Mm-hmm. Here we are talking about language games. Just gaming. Remember? Okay. Just saying. You don't play around with language. And in this sense, there are no language games. There are stakes tied to genres of discourse. When these stakes are attained, we talk about success. There is conflict, therefore. The conflict, though, is not between humans or between any other entities. Rather, these result from phrases. Okay, now you see, this is like, you think you're so important in your conflicts. They're not even your conflicts. They're conflicts between phrases or among phrases. At bottom, one in general presupposes a language naturally at peace with itself. Communication. This is what we use this language. We have linguistics, we have dictionaries, we have all kinds of books with the rules about this language. And of course we have this pet in the house, and it knows that it's not supposed to poop on the floor. Okay? And then the very moment, you're saying that to somebody, the pet should poop on the floor. Okay? And perturbed, for instance, only by the wills, passions, and intentions of humans. Anthropocentrism. So it's not just ethnocentrism, where you have one ethnic group determining everything, not only for itself, but for another ethnic group. Okay? One of the major sins of anthropology. Okay, well, the major sin of anthropology is anthro. All the great tragedy is based on that. What's the answer to the question, the riddle is put forth by the Sphinx to Oedipus? It's anthropos. Anthropos. And Oedipus gets to be the stand-in for everybody. the scapegoat, so to speak, so that we can all learn. But it doesn't matter if we have learned this, because it's not going to change our behavior. This is clear in the tragedies. I think a lot of people, though, this has changed dramatically, because you can find evidence, here and there all through the history of philosophy. A lot of people have not bothered to study the tragedies and then write philosophy. Okay. It's clearly the case in rhetoric. People don't bother reading the tragedies at all. Embrace them and see how other philosophers, say Hegel, have wrestled with them. Kenneth Burke certainly did, and did what he could, but my sense is that he watered it down too much. He didn't want to have to deal with all that mess. Okay, and actually, you have to water it down, because if you didn't, you wouldn't do anything. Because the other choice that comes across in The Birth of Tragedy is it's best that you not be born, but you have been brought into this world. Therefore, commit suicide, kill yourself as quickly as possible. Because as long as they're human beings, there is no hope. I mean, this is what, basically, language has said to us. Now, please don't, do that. In a matter of language, the revolution of relativity and of quantum theory remains to be made. No matter what its regimen, every phrase is in principle what is at stake, and a difference between genres of discourse. There's something I want you to do. We have spent time with Jean-Luc. In operative community, he defines community as resistance. If we're resisting each other, arguing, bickering or whatever, that's community. Okay. If there is no resistance, I guess there's entropy and there's death and whatever. So I want you to keep in mind that there's a close relationship between what Lyotard is saying here about remember I walked in and said, what is your relationship with language? Okay. For Heraclitus, the logos was constant strife. Constant strife. In any attempt to try to, fix it was wrong. Morally, ethically, it was just dangerous, okay? Because language is going to have its way. Any attempt to try to nail it down and fix it in terms of laws will bring totalitarianism. Bad stuff. So like Badu, you can subtract 1, but how do you subtract 1 and get rid of it? If there was a word in the dictionary that you could erase, what would it be? And really, what would it come down to? But it would tell us something about you, if we were to do that. We could all write them down on cards, signage, and all be anonymous, and then we could read out the words and that kind of thing. But what would be the word? What's the word for fear of words?
Logophobia?
But there's another one, and it's an honest question, I can't recall it right now, but yeah, logophobia. Fear of words. I mean, we have such bad relations with words that we need witch doctors. Psychoanalysts, therapists, mentors, and so on to help us with it. Because that's what the cure is. The cure is the language you use. What's the talking cure? This differend proceeds from the question, which accompanies any phrase, of how to link onto it. Something is said. Something is said here. You know, and each time something is said, we try to link. You know, if it's across us, from one to the next, we try to link up with it some way or another, right? Okay. And there is and that could be the beginning of resistance, okay? And that's good, okay? Right? And then there's a counter resistance and so on. Or it could be as simple as this. I'm not sure what you're saying. Let me say this as my attempt at an exposition of what you were saying. And please tell me, because I'm trying to figure out if I really understand what you're saying. Because we do this all the time, okay? And especially when you're writing. If you're writing a book and you're really working out of 5 or 6 different, let's say, philosophers, thinkers, whatever, you have to give an exposition. And that makes the book longer and longer and longer, and people tend not to give expositions. Just go read the book yourself. Well, I do, and I get a different reading. So your arguments are based on your reading, and that's fine, and I can sort of see your reading, but if you're compelled to reach as many readers as you can, which is what I want to do, I give an exposition, okay? And I simply say, in many cases I say, you know, for the most part, other people may not read this section of the book, you know, that I'm working from, somebody else's book, the way I'm doing it, and I want you to know that I'm casuistically stretching this, okay? After all theories do travel, and science said all theories travel. We pick up a theory and we just picking it up and putting it in our own hand and writing about it. We change it somewhat, okay? Theories have a life of their own, okay? Even though we're changing it, we think we're twisting it, you know, giving it a half twist in some way or another as we would in a topological structure. It's still twisting itself because like it's with us now in our body. We have read it, it's gone through our eyes and gone into our system. It's going to be different. But, so you would even have to give this is my understanding of what this passage, understanding, okay, of what this passage is all about. Okay? And that's considered to be ethical, okay, and professional, and so care, to give care in what you would say. But even then there's going to be resistance. But what you can ask for is, let's assume as if this is, let's suspend this. You know, you're wanting to disagree immediately. Okay. Let's suspend this, dear reader. Let's see where it's going to take us. The differend proceeds from the question which accompanies any phrase of how to link onto it. And this question proceeds from the nothingness that so separates one phrase from the following. The nothingness. Now, he gets this idea of the nothingness in a series of notes from Gorgias. He starts out with the trials, the difference between the defense and what's the other in the trials? Plaintiff, yes, thank you. Plaintiff and the defense. And it's the plaintiff that has, the group bringing the charges that have got to demonstrate the evidence, whereas, the defense does not, can constantly attack the evidence, and evidence is easy to attack. Well, we've got all this DNA. Well, did you follow the protocol of collecting the DNA? And so, DNA just doesn't walk and say, okay, this guy did it. It just doesn't work that way. Someone has to collect this information. And you look, and humans err. They make mistakes. And all you have to do is put doubt in the mind of the jury or the judge. Okay? Serious doubt. Raise a question. So it's easier. A lot of people think. A lot of people still to this day want to get rid of the defense altogether. Just bring in the evidence. And the very idea that a defense attorney got someone off when everyone knows the person is guilty. Let's say knows, okay? It's terrible. But what is really being protected? Not the people in the courtroom. It's not about them. They're an individual case. And, you know, the remedy might be there and the remedy may not be there. What is being protected? The law. This is really hard to understand. It is the law that is being protected because there are other people who are going to come in. Okay? And so if the law, in terms of police, okay, and in terms of people in the labs, the forensic labs, and the entire system, they're to implement the law, to realize it, to live it, okay, to have your day or days in court. They have got to follow protocols, because if not, they are losing the law. So that's why a judge would have to say, I have to throw this case out, because you did such and such, Sergeant so-and-so. Okay? You forced this person to say those things in this interview, to claim that, yeah, I did it. So it's not, you can't be submitted anymore. Even though they know they have other evidence, okay, that the person is guilty. So you would think, well, common sense says, go in and find the person guilty. Then you have a case history there. Remember, he opens with a case history, okay, about hearsay. Anyone can bring it in. And that's part of the law. It's an extension of the law. Through deliberation, you know, in a lawmaking body, the Senate, you know, the House, whatever, at the state level or at the federal level, or other countries and how they do this. You know, they have constitutional groups and so on, or through basic tradition. They deliberate and they try to project what would happen in the future and how should it be dealt with. So deliberation, you know, really deals with the future. So they make the laws. And then you go into the courtroom and you have judicial forensic discourse, another speech act, major speech act. And they look at the past, at what has taken place, based on laws projected into the future. Are you following this? Okay. And doing their best. You know, human beings are doing their best. And they can never absolutely feel certain. Even if you know, there's this incredible passage in Plato's dialogue, the Gorgias, in which Socrates says, this is paraphrase, I do not understand why people who have committed a crime to the state just don't go to the court and say, I'm guilty. Well, Socrates, about every other crime that occurs, you know, every 2, every 3, there are all these people going into the police department saying, I did it! You know, I did it. Where do you want me to sign? You know, there are these people who just confess, you know. So that's not going to work. Okay. I mean, the idea is naive to begin with that the criminal would actually go do that. It happens though, right? The person does go at times, but it's not going to, you know, that policy is not going to work. But even if you were to implement it, okay, you have to deal with 5, 6, 7, you know, people who are claiming they get known by the police, okay, for being guilty for every crime. And so you can sort of eliminate them that way, but you know, this could be a ruse. You know, it's all playing out because they're crying down. You know, so I mean, it's ruse is all the way down. You know, it's you don't know what's going on. What's at stake is everything's at stake. Please, you know, interrupt me at any time. What am I doing? I'm just linking. And do I know what my links are before I come in? Nope. And then I'm linking, and then I make a linkage to go, oh, that's not a good linkage, which gives me another linkage, you know, to try again, and so on. Same thing with you. And there's going to be a point in time, and there are many in this book, when I will make a linkage that is what? Heretical. Or stupid. needing extra glue to get, to the next one or something like that. But this is what we do. Okay. Can we ever get through this paragraph? And the question proceeds from the nothingness that separates one phrase. The nothingness is the glue. One phrase from the following. There are differends because are like there is arideness. That's why they're differends. So we have an explanation. Explanation. Notice all those X prefixes? Ex ample. Okay. Paradigm. Alongside. Or outside. Thrown outside. So when this arideness or this is often translated in two ways. And I haven't made this clear, so let me please make this a little more clear now. Haha. Event is normally translated as event or appropriation. That's stupid, but you'll find it, from the German into English as appropriation. I'm not a translator, but please let me it say this. A better way of coming up with an English word is an expropriation, because you're being thrown out. You have a line of thought, right? And all of a sudden, or you're in a court scene, or you just, you're writing, or a bunch of philosophers are together, and then all of a sudden, you're following this line of thinking, all of a sudden, boom, you're over here. What was that? Or you hit a wall. Not a wall, because that assumes you can dig under it or climb over or something. But something happens. There's a break, there's an interruption, there's disruption, okay. Eruption, volcanic, earthquake, something like that, in thought. I'm speaking metaphorically. Or in terms of real things. We've had a few earthquakes lately. What the hell is that all about? And all these volcanoes? Getting ready for 2012. Paracelsus. Yeah. Let's see, when is that supposed to happen? Because will we all be here next year? And so there's a kind of norm that happens, and by the calendar, and you have your week planned out, and Sunday is always Sunday, unless there's an interruption or something like that. And this is what reminds us, affinity. Ruptured away from, even though there's infinity, the possibility of infinity, but not transcendental. And if it is transcendental, then we have to figure out why God would allow something to happen. Okay. Then we have this whole system of rationalization called theodicy. The justification of the ways of God to man. Alexander Pope's major work, which is the epistle to, damn it, and almost the entire 100-page thing memorized. I studied it so much over time. Is working out of a theodicy, Theodicy. Leibniz did the same. He has a whole work called theodicy. So, how do we survive in all of that? Because you can come up with all the justifications, but you can still say, I can think of a better place. Easily. What was that called? I had a link to There are difference because, or like, there is a arideness. Okay, so he's explaining now what a differend is, and it's linked up with arideness. The person who talks about this again a lot is who? Heidegger. But that's forgotten as much as possible. Genres of discourse are, but wait a minute, I'm skipping a line here. Is that right? But that's forgotten as much as possible. Genres of discourse are modes of forgetting the nothingness or of forgetting the occurrence. So genres, they're mechanisms, right? Felicio refers to them as mechanisms. They're apparatuses. Giorgio would say they're apparatuses. Okay. Other two people who have written on this is Derrida and Deleuze. They fill the void between phrases. Genres fill the void between phrases. They invite us to forgive. Maybe it's a mechanism of forgiving. Who are we forgiving? God, we will forgive you because we're capable of forgiving what you have created here. It's from a poem, an American poet, 20th century. This nothingness is nevertheless what opens up the possibility of finalities proper to the genre. You remember what he said, Lyotard says in Just Game? It's just hanging out there. It's just hanging out there. And finally he gives a name to it. It's a turn on nothingness. We go back to nothingness again. So, nothing exists, Guardian says. Now, you can read that in all kinds of ways. But would you rather have something exist or nothing exists? If something exists, who's going to determine what this something is? Remember, what we don't want is a description being derived from a prescription. Because that's taking only part of all of that stuff and saying, that's it. Again, what word would you, if you had the power to do so, if you could push a button, what word would you delete from the dictionary? Let's say English dictionary. What would it be? This nothingness is nevertheless what opens up the possibility of finalities proper to the genres. So the genre has its protocols. If the manner, but it gets its protocols, new ones every day from the nothingness. If the manner of linking when necessary filled in, there would not be several possible modes. No void would leave room for that causality exerted from afore, namely final causality. You know, who made you? I remember the Baltimore Catechism, and I think one of the first questions, if not the first question, is who made you? So we were all, to memorize all of these things. All of these were the questions. We were not to think about them. We were to memorize. Because the answers were what? Canonized. He's talking about canonized thinking. It's dangerous. So when Derrida writes Archive Fever, about keeping the canon open, this is one reason to interpretation. The archives are keeping the archives, but the archives also have the job given to them, the responsibility of interpreting the documents. So you don't go to look at the documents and make linkages that other people have not made. What you do is you go to the Baltimore Catechism and you find out what the proper linkages are. Who made you? Well, mom and dad. Well, who made mom? Who made dad? Well, their mom and dad. So you get into this not infinite, but long, going back, okay? And you're looking finally, because you have to stop this. You can't go on forever and ever and ever, okay? And so God made our first parents. Oh, okay, well, I was getting tired, This is, Locke talks about this thing about, this is grounding, right? Okay. Locke talks about this as a young boy is asking the question about what, about foundations. He doesn't use the word. Someone says, well, everything rests on the turtle. You've heard this before, okay? And it's picked up by the anthropologists. kid says, well, what's holding up the turtle? Another turtle. And then so the answer is, it's turtles all the way down. But when they know, wait a minute, what's holding up all those turtles? The big, big, big elephant. Yeah. And the kid goes, oh. And then 2 weeks later or something like that, he would think, I'm adding to the story now. Gee, well, what's holding up the elephant? Any thoughts?